Go back! I want to be monkey!
Now I could start this video, like many others, with a wordy spiel about the art of filmmaking, CGI, the origin, importance and impact of Planet of the Apes, but if you're watching this, odds are you already know all that. If for some reason you don't know about Planet of the Apes, then let me fill you in on the bare minimum need to know facts about the franchise. Fact number 1. The Planet of the Apes trilogy is bloomin' awesome, okay? It's the best thing since sliced bread, and if you haven't seen it yet, then you must do so now. I mean it. That's an order. Fact number 2. Repeat fact 1. You get the point. But in all seriousness, there's about a dozen reasons or so why myself and many others parrot that sentiment. Where do I even begin? You have beautiful cinematography, gripping narrative, immersive world building, as well as a surprisingly memorable and effective score, which I can't show you any of it. Thank you, copyright. I love it. Etc, etc. I could go on, but the element at the centre of all these successful aspects is no doubt our beloved talking monkey Caesar, played by Andy Serkis, the primary protagonist of the Apes trilogy and the most important cog in the plot machine. These films wouldn't be the same, and hell, wouldn't even be a thing in the first place without him. Possibly one of the most well-written characters in all of cinema, which might sound like a pretentious exaggeration to some, but to anyone that has seen these movies, it's not really a far-fetched claim to make. Not only does he star in some of the most iconic scenes of all time, I mean, who can forget the "No! No!" But he also goes through a decade-spanning arc of progression that puts his moral values, ape-like instincts and human personality traits at odds in furtherance of bettering his tribe's ever-capricious situation. While the prior movies are undoubtedly important for Caesar's character progression, and I'll most likely be referring back to them every now and then throughout the video, I think that war is the most crucial for Caesar, as the events that take place in this film are what cement his legacy, which, as we can see in the latest movie, lasts for generations. But hey, don't take my word for it. According to director Matt Reeves, this was always part of the plan.
And what we wanted to do was to create sort of a mythic final leg to Caesar's journey, to turn him into kind of an ape Moses, the seminal figure in all ape history, like we were going to do sort of a Darwinian biblical epic.
Oh, and also it's my personal favourite Apes movie, so I want to talk about it. With all that out of the way, let's dive into the masterclass movie that is War for the Planet of the Apes, and of course the legacy of one Caesar. Well, it's just Caesar. My man doesn't have a last name. So War is of course the final film in the Caesar trilogy, and as the title entails, depicts the ongoing war between the apes and the humans. But how did we get here? Well, to give you the Cliff Notes summary, Caesar is a genetically enhanced ape with increased intelligence via the drug testing for ALZ-112, a cure for Alzheimer's. He is raised and taught sign language by James Franco, but after attacking a neighbour one day, gets imprisoned in a cage to which he's like fleeing captivity with the other apes and enhancing their intelligence with ALZ-113, a new version of the Alzheimer's cure that actually causes terminal illness within humans. They retreat to the forest, and after 10 years, most of humanity has died off from the simian flu. A small settlement still lives though, and one of the humans named Malcolm eventually manages to convince Caesar to let them fix the dam, restoring power to the city. The plan succeeds and all seems well, until Koba, an ape that despises humanity, sets fire to the ape colony and shoots Caesar, blaming the humans and thus provoking them to invade the city. Caesar survives and with Malcolm's help manages to stop Koba. Unfortunately, the damage has already been done, the humans having already contacted the military for assistance, triggering the events of War for the Planet of the Apes. These two films give rise to Caesar's character and personality, showing him to be a compassionate, forgiving and reasonable ape due to having grown up experiencing human love and kindness from James Franco. Pretty ironic considering his real life, shenanigans, but hey, it's part of the lore, so what are you gonna do? Aspects needed in order to see through the dawn of his ape tribe that he would eventually go to war for. So, why briefly mention all this? Well, keep it in the back of your head, because what makes the third entry so good is that we see Caesar's character progression and established character traits built up in the first two films be put through the ringer in an ultimate test of will. Without further ado, let's finally talk about the bloody movie already. The film opens on an eerily quiet and out of focus tracking shot, following a bunch of human soldiers. It's here we see the first and last scene shot from the perspective of the humans. No, really. After this scene, unless I'm mistaken, there is no moment in the rest of the movie without an ape in it, unlike the prior entries. Why? Well, because this is 100% Caesar's movie. In both Rise and Dawn, he was more of a douche-agonist alongside James Franco's nameless ass and Malcolm. We got both the human and ape perspectives to show the multiple shades of grey in this complex rivalry. That's not the case in War as One. This film is more of a character study for Caesar, putting his growth and progression to the test like I said earlier. It's also worth noting that Caesar speaks the most in this film out of any other, emphasising the fact that this is his story and that he's become more human despite his attempts to distance himself from them. 2. It's a pretty black and white conflict, at least that we know of so far. It's clear that the humans have come to slaughter the apes in a war that they didn't even want in the first place, but have no choice but to participate in for their own survival, thanks to Cobra being an absolute wanker. Also, compare this to the opening scene of Dawn, where we literally open on Caesar's face before he starts hunting with his fellow apes. In War, we don't see him until a solid few minutes in. While completely different opening scenes, they're both similar in showing the beginning status quo. In Dawn's case, showing us the equilibrium of apes living in harmony, only for it to be disrupted by the existence of humans, causing a rift between Caesar and Cobra. And in War's case, demonstrating that Caesar isn't even directly part of the conflict to begin with, operating strategically behind the scenes due to his key role in keeping the apes alive. As you'd expect, even these horrible circumstances don't last. The apes manage to capture some of the humans, taking them hostage alongside one of their ape accomplices, whom they mockingly refer to as Donkey. You see, there were quite a few apes who were loyal to Cobra, even after his defeat, opting to side with the humans for their own survival instead of going back to Caesar, who they believe to be weak. At least that's the perspective Donkey has on him. Speaking of Caesar, it's in this very scene where we're introduced to him, in this awesome looking sequence. Shot from Caesar's point of view, we see all of the apes gazing in awe, bowing down and gesturing for approval. Without saying a word, they've established the great amount of admiration and respect his tribe has for him. Oh geez, how cool is that? Golly, I sure hope he doesn't do anything to squander that. When the camera eventually reveals our favourite monkey, we see on full display the powerful, commanding aura he carries, barely acknowledging his kin in the face of his greatest enemy. Instead of killing them, Caesar instead grants them mercy, sparing their lives and sending them back to the colonel in hopes of demonstrating that they're not savages, and the killing could stop. This would inevitably turn out to be his greatest mistake, as the humans would later return to the ape hideout, killing his wife and son in the process. While Caesar seemingly acknowledged the similarity between apes and humans in the last film, he failed to take into account that humans also share the ape-like tendency towards brutality, ruthlessness, and barbarism. An example of Caesar's righteous nature working to his detriment. A conclusion that both we the audience and Caesar himself reaches, as this would be the defining moment that would send him down the twisted path of revenge, leaving the rest of his clan behind. It's also worth noting that this scene is the first time we see Caesar and the Colonel, the antagonist of the movie played by Woody Harrelson, interact. And I use interact with heavy quotations because it's more like an old western stare down than anything. I know I'm a broken record at this point, and quite frankly I'm probably going to keep saying it throughout the video, but it bears repeating. This is just a damn good scene. Initially, Caesar gives the Colonel a cold, angry stare, to which the Colonel responds in confusion, oddly enough. We don't really know why until he looks away from him, in turn making Caesar do the same. The camera pans to the right, and that's where we get the reveal of Caesar's deceased family, followed by a look from Caesar that I can only describe as the most vitriolic expression of anguish you've ever seen. It cannot be overstated how good Andy Serkis is in this movie. I mean, the man bloody kills it, like, goddamn. Accompany that with some dramatic drum beats and it's just, mwah. It's beautiful. So after this devastating loss, Caesar instructs the apes to venture beyond the mountains, away from the humans where it's safe, while he seeks out the Colonel to get revenge for what he did. Alone. Well, alone for all of 5 seconds, until a few moments later he's approached by his closest ape compatriots, who insist on going with him, to which he begrudgingly agrees. They venture forth and eventually discover a small human camp where they encounter a random soldier separated from the rest of the group. Caesar just blows him away without a second thought, already showcasing the descent from his usual compassionate, reasonable self. It turns out the bloke was actually caring for his daughter, who for some reason can't speak. Maurice convinces Caesar to let the girl accompany them, as she would die out on her own. So the little girl becomes one of the more major side characters in the film, joining our not so merry gang of apes on their quest to find the Colonel. Speaking of side characters, I think it's about time we talked about them now that most of the gang is here. First of all, you have the only human amongst the group, later dubbed Nova by Maurice. Arguably the most important character to Caesar, even if he doesn't realise it, as she's practically the physical manifestation of his ever-dwindling humanity. To elaborate, the first scene she's in, Caesar's pointing a gun in her face, debating whether to pull the trigger. Mind you, this scene takes place shortly after his family was killed, so this was at his peak of hating humanity. While he acts cold and distant to begin with, over the course of the film he eventually warms up to her, which ends up working in his favour, saving his life and winning back over his tribe later on. And man, how perfect is it that she also starts off not able to say a word or even communicate, but then goes on to form bonds, use sign language, and eventually become an ape in all but appearance only by the end of the film. The more I think about it, the more both her and Caesar's arcs through the film are pretty analogous with one another, alongside reminding Caesar where he came from and why it matters. Showing the audience that embracing his external human side and balancing it with his internal ape instincts is what got him so far in the first place. Maurice is another prevalent side character in the Apes trilogy as a whole. A kind-hearted orangutan who's rarely seen to be aggressive unless absolutely necessary. In this movie, and by extension their prior two films as well, Maurice has always been a representation of Caesar's consciousness, being his closest confidant out of all the apes. We see this multiple times in the movie, like for example, the scene where they find Nova. Whilst Caesar was considering pulling the trigger, it was ultimately Maurice who lowered the gun. Plus shortly thereafter, Caesar was content on leaving her there, and probably would have were it not for Maurice's counsel. As for Rocket and Luca, I mean, they're the ultimate bros for life that are along for the ride. Jokes aside, all of the side characters, even the bloke we'll meet pretty soon, are all important in their own way. They are the embodiment of Caesar's compassion and morality that he himself instilled into them. So later on in the movie when he pushes them away, it's quite poetic seeing the apes try to reach him with the lessons passed on to them. Reuniting with his ape buddies coincides with the return of his moral compass and emotional yet reasonable nature, which eventually leads to their prosperity because, at the end of the day, ape together strong. If there's one message you're going to take away from the movie, then it should be that. After taking Nova with them, they manage to find a small human settlement which the apes sneak into, and to their surprise, end up finding one of their own. A snow-white gorilla called Winter, who was the one that sold out their location in the first place, in turn for his own safety. In this scene we see yet another display of Caesar's desire for hate and revenge, when he accidentally kills Winter, choking him out to avoid detection by the humans. This scene also marks the first of two appearances by a familiar ape we all thought dead. Yes, somehow Cobra returned. As a hallucination experienced by Caesar, anyway. He returns to face Caesar, taunting him with his old rule of ape no kill ape, which he is just clearly violated. He appears before Caesar once more in the second act of the film where he's on the brink of death, telling him that he can't save the other apes and that he should just give up. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but Cobra in this film has always seemed like Caesar's superego. The judgmental part of his brain serving as a reminder of his failures and descent towards becoming someone who was the antithesis of his prior ideals. About that, like his human capacity for compassion and understanding, he fundamentally rejects, in pursuit of his own hubris and justification for revenge. Though eventually coming to terms with this newly discovered part of himself, giving him perspective on his former enemy. Having experienced pain directly caused by the humans, Caesar now understands what Cobra was going through more so than in the prior film. Even speaking of him in a more sympathetic light during later scenes in the movie.
He could not escape his hate, and I still cannot escape mine.
Before Winter's death, he tells the group that the military forces are heading back to their base up north, and whilst venturing forwards in pursuit of the humans, they witness them executing their own troops, who like Nova, also can't speak. Yeah, there's definitely something more at play here than just humans attacking apes, though we don't know what it is yet. When Caesar sees one of the humans still alive, it does temporarily serve as a wake-up call, reminding him of his compassion for humans, wherein he decides to grant the soldier mercy, giving him a quick death. After taking a short break to do some reconnaissance, one of their horses gets stolen by some stranger who is eventually revealed to be an ape, though not one that Caesar or the rest of the group recognises. This is none other than Bad Ape. That's literally his name, a chimpanzee who was raised in a zoo and managed to escape before getting killed by the humans after the outbreak of the ALZ virus. He basically serves as the comic relief for the movie, adding much needed levity to this 2-hour and 20-minute tear jerkathon. He's just a goofy little guy, what's not to love? Bad Ape knows about the human base of operations, but is reluctant to go at first. Caesar eventually managed to convince him and they finally reach the human base. But before they could do anything though, Caesar and Luca get ambushed by a human squad, and unfortunately, our boy Luca takes a bad hit in Caesar's place, saving his life but passing away in the process. A heartfelt moment that hits Nova the hardest, much to Caesar and Rocket's surprise. You'd think this would be the come to Jesus realization for Caesar, stopping his hatred for humanity and ending his crusade for revenge. However, in his anguish, this moment only goes to harden his already strong resolve, and Maurice's comment likening him to Cobra definitely didn't help things, especially on a conscious level. He storms off towards the humans alone, where he makes a horrific discovery. All of his fellow apes have been imprisoned in a labor camp, being ambushed on their way through the mountains, and without Caesar's aid to guide them, they end up getting captured by the humans. Some of them even being put on display in a fucked up and twisted crucifixion. He eventually gets attacked from behind by Donkey, imprisoned and forced to work like all the others. Caesar's bitter hatred and selfish desire for vengeance cost him not only his soul and prime morality, but also his own people, who no longer trust him, turning away at the mere sight of him, in direct contrast to the beginning of the movie where they all gazed in admiration. This is undoubtedly Caesar's lowest point in the movie. He's lost just about everything, leaving his friends behind, the respect of his clan, and that's all on top of the crippling loss of his wife and son, hence why Cobra shows up to taunt him. Hell, maybe he's right. What's the point in continuing forward? He has nothing else to lose. Caesar should just give up. Except he doesn't. Despite being forced to work, he continually defies the order of Donkey and the Colonel, in turn inspiring his apes to do the same. Caesar's will has only strengthened through the agonizing ordeal, despite the temptation of giving up, because the one thing, the only thing, he cares about more than revenge or anything else is his family, his fellow apes, and their well-being. While it doesn't happen overnight, he does eventually win their favour, which we see perfectly demonstrated in the scene where Nova walks into the human base, offering him water after starving for several days. The rest of the apes take notice, offering their food as well in a show of solidarity and a demonstration of their newly reformed loyalty. I briefly mentioned this scene earlier and how it shows that Caesar embracing his humanity helped save his life, but the same can be said of the loyalty and respect of his clan.
The idea here was that the love that Caesar had shown the apes was now being reflected back to him. He'd won them fully back now. They were no longer lost to him, and that this would be the thing that would save his life.
The music is just perfect here. Michael Giacchino is a bloomin' genius. All in all, a great scene, though if I had to pick my favourite moment in the movie, it would be the conversation between the Colonel and Caesar, where the Colonel reveals just about everything. Not only what's going on, but why it's happening in the first place. The Colonel brings Caesar into his office, demanding that he orders the apes to work, to which Caesar insists that they need food and water, calling the Colonel merciless, not only for his treatment of the apes, but also his own men. This spurs the Colonel into an insane rant, where we learn that the virus has mutated, now robbing humans of greater thinking and speech, is why he was killing his troops in the first place. To prevent the spread of the mutation, his superiors didn't approve of his methods, so he defied them, killing any naysayers, stating that if they wanted to relieve him of his command, they would have to do it personally. Hence why he had the apes work to reinforce the wall before inevitably killing them off. All of this is told to us through some of the most amazing acting from Woody Harrelson, who just knocks out of the park. He plays him with this cold and calculating outward appearance, which is clearly motivated by emotion, as he had to kill his own son, which he described as a purifying moment. The sad part is that he actually ended up being 100% right about what the future would bring.
It will be the last of our kind. It will be a planet of apes, and we will become your cattle.
The Colonel seemingly has a solid grip on the situation, yet is consumed by emotion, ironically criticising Caesar for the same reason.
So emotional!
This is why I think the Colonel is the best villain in the trilogy, in my opinion. He's not wrong, far from it. But the barbaric means and fucked up thought process behind his actions clearly show the madness of a terrifying villain with a commanding presence, just like Caesar. It's also in the scene where we see Caesar feeling empathy for the humans for the first time in the movie. The Colonel's brutality being a product of his experiences in an extreme situation, again, just like Caesar. Moving on, Caesar alongside both the imprisoned ape clan and his friends on the outside plan to sneak out of the base before the humans start attacking each other. If I had one criticism of this movie, it would be the escape scene, because you really have to suspend your disbelief to accept what's going on. Their whole plan would go to shit if even one of the soldiers just looked up and saw the apes climbing on the wires, or exiting through the holes. Plus, somehow only one of them acknowledges their disappearance, and that's in the morning when the humans start bombing the base. It's not so bad it ruins the movie or anything, so I can forgive it. Before they can all flee to safety, Caesar insists on finishing what he started, getting revenge on the Colonel for what he did, all the while the other apes have to somehow escape while the humans are at war with each other. Caesar goes up to the Colonel's office intending to finish him off, only to find that he too has succumbed to the mutation, having touched Nova's doll, that she left in Caesar's cage the other day. If you ever hear people give the redundant take of CGI being soulless or inferior to practical, I mean look no further than this scene. The raw emotion on display from Andy Serkis is bloody phenomenal, and make no mistake, the tears you're seeing in the scene were actually his.
They took Andy's tear from the take and used it. And so there are a few places in the movie where Caesar's tears aren't CG, they're literally Andy's.
The film is every bit a grandiose display of raw acting talent like any other movie, only we get to see some stellar VFX work alongside it. Caesar's hate and desire fight a fierce war with his better nature in the span of a few seconds, which we see the entirety of on full display with his facial expressions, ultimately deciding not to shoot the Colonel, instead leaving the gun within arm's reach so he can do it himself. What I like about this scene also is that there's quite the debate to be had on whether this is truly an act of mercy or not. Personally, I always viewed the scene as Caesar refusing to give in to the urge he's been enticed by this entire movie, thus showing the audience and himself that he is well and truly not like Cobra, though still acknowledging that this primal desire is still a part of himself which he can't hide, which is why he stuck around to watch the Colonel take his own life. Whilst not acting like or being motivated by the same reasons as Cobra, he is still undeniably just as strong-willed, which at the last moment Donkey recognises. Seeing Caesar willing to give his own life in order to save the apes by throwing a grenade into an oil tanker before other humans can finish him off. Donkey fires a grenade at the humans, promptly being killed for his betrayal. However, his sacrifice gives Caesar enough time to chuck a grenade, destroying the military defences and saving his apes in the process. The action is not over yet though, as all the explosions cause an avalanche which all the apes narrowly avoid, but end up killing off all the attacking human forces. Finally, at last, the apes are able to make their journey beyond the mountains safely where they find a new home. Though, unfortunately, for our beloved protagonist, his injuries sustained from the final battle get the better of him, and just like that, he passes away, even in death giving his life for the apes, prioritising their safe travel to their new home over his own life. And with that, War for the Planet of the Apes comes to an end. Holy shit. What a fantastic bloody movie. It gets almost everything right that you'd expect from a movie, especially the acting, which is out of this world. Hopefully I've given you at least some insight into why Caesar is one of the greatest characters in all of cinema, and hell, I only covered the final film in this video. Caesar is a complex, multi-layered character who has experienced both the human and ape worlds, finding a balance between the impressions that they both imprinted on him for the betterment of his ape tribe. The one thing that he cares about the most, which is further emphasised by the ending. His actions in this film undoubtedly created a legacy for himself that will be remembered for many years to come, not only in potential future movies but also the audience. We spent 2 movies following his journey establishing his character only for War to put him through some of the most traumatic experiences imaginable. Yet still, he came out on top, with his morality and values intact. A testament to the unwavering will of this character. If you haven't watched the Planet of the Apes trilogy, then I strongly urge you to do so, because it's amazing and I've probably barely scratched the surface here. Even 20 years from now, I personally believe there will still be discussion on these awesome movies, and more importantly, the legacy of Caesar. With that being said, that's all I have to say on Caesar and War for the Planet of the Apes. Like if you liked, dislike if you disliked, subscribe for more quality content, and I'll see you guys next time.
Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. It doesn't matter if it's boiled or fried. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. It doesn't matter if it's boiled or fried.